Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, welcome to the program. I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for today's show, because today on the program we have, of course, Ralph Bond. Every Friday he joins us to talk all about science and technology and, just space, everything. He finds 4 different stories every single week, sometimes more, sometimes less, but 4 stories, and we just talk about stories that you may have missed over the week, because I gotta say, even though we don't do politics here, and we've seen a lot of good tech shows go by the wayside as soon as they start dabbling in politics, I do have to say though, it's the middle of 2023 and we're already gearing up for like an election cycle. It's like 18 months away before we actually have to care about this kind of stuff, and the news is already dominated by who said what, when, and how they said it. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot's going to fly under our radar, but hey, Ralph's going to be here to help us really, find it among all the minutia that people say. So everyone, with that said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including our new Ralph Bond section that will have links to everything that Ralph does with us. But of course, just like always, it's going to be in the show notes, it's going to be in the podcast, it's going to be on the website. Every single article that we talk about will be included with links, sources, and more in the show notes. Computeramerica.com is the best place to find that. And with that being said, go ahead, find us on social media. Go ahead and find us wherever you hear podcasts, wherever you enjoy your stuff. Computer America is hopefully there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Ralph on and just have a very calm, relaxing, and nice Friday. So Ralph Bond, welcome back onto the program. How you been?
Ben, and thanks. That was a great setup for today's show, and we've got a really fun mixed bag. And what I do is I look for stories in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, across the board. This is what I do as the science and tech trends correspondent. So that's a keyword, trends. What Ben and I are going to talk about today, we've selected 4 articles that kind of give you a glimpse of where we're going in the fields of science and technology. So if you're looking for an upbeat end to your week, you've come to the right place, because we don't do negative. We do stuff that's going to inspire you and leave you feeling better about where we're going. Absolutely.
Although I will say number 1 kind of straddles that line, because there's a lot of Ralph, I feel like there's like a lot of anxiety with AI.
Yes.
I'm sure that there were a lot of people that, let's say if you're a carriage and buggy driver and you see the invention of the motor car and you're like, well, that could be trouble looming. I feel like AI is kind of having the same kind of anxiety-inducing vibe, but react to it how you will. It's not going to stop, and I think it's best to learn to use these things to their full potential sooner rather than later, because you can't just put that back on the shelf. No, it's going to come, but it's also going to come with a lot of benefits, and that is, I think, the thing that we can really highlight here. So story number 1 definitely highlights that.
Yeah, exactly right. This is a great example of artificial intelligence. And it is, in this case, a double-edged sword. Tremendous positive things for people with speech impediments or speech disability, but on the same side, some negatives, and we'll get into that. And what I do, folks, is I look for articles. I scan a lot of different publications. What we're going to do is give you the high points, the essential nuggets from each of these articles. I don't write these articles. I look for them. We're going to just give you the highlights We've got the show notes. Come out to computeramerica.com. Get the show notes if you want to dive deeper into each of these stories, if you want to see the links and see the images as well. This is the great resource that Ben and I put together every week. So the headline for the first story is New AI System Can Translate a Person's Brain Activity into a Continuous Stream of Text. Keyword, continuous, okay? And by the way, I got this from an outfit called psypost.org. That's psypost.org. This is the first time I've pulled an article from this outlet, so I wanted to share with the audience. This is a really interesting outlet, a story here by Christina Maher. And psypost.org is a psychology and neuroscience news website dedicated to reporting the latest research on human behavior, cognition, and society. So I'm going to be monitoring this outlet as we go forward in the future as well. So let's get into the story. Here we go. Neuroscientists at the University of Texas have, for the first time, decoded data from non-invasive brain scans and used them to reconstruct language and meaning from stories that people hear, see, or even imagine. Wow. Okay. In a new study published in Nature Neuroscience, Alexander Huth and his colleagues successfully recovered the gist of language and sometimes exact phrases from functional magnetic resonance imaging brain recordings of 3 test participants. Language decoding models, a little background here. Language decoding models, also called speech decoders, aim to use recordings of a person's brain activity to discover the words they hear, imagine, or say. And for me, the imagine part is really freaky. Until now, speech decoders have only been used with data from devices surgically implanted in the brain, which limits their usefulness, needless to say. Other decoders, which used non-invasive brain activity recordings, have been able to decode single words or maybe short phrases, but not continuous language. The new University of Texas research used the blood oxygen level dependent signal, I know this gets geeky, from functional magnetic resonance imaging brain recordings, or scans, which shows changes in blood flow and oxygenation levels in different parts of the brain. So we're talking about the mechanics of what these folks at the University of Texas did. So by focusing on patterns of activity in brain regions and networks that process language, the researchers found their decoder could be trained to reconstruct continuous language, including some specific words and the general meaning of sentences. And I want to stop for a second, Ben, and as we go forward here, you're going to see that, yes, it's all true what they're saying here in the article, but it's not perfect, okay? It's the beginning, but we'll get to that in a second. So in specific, the decoder took the brain responses of 3 participants as they listened to stories and generated sequences of words that were likely to have produced those brain responses. And these word sequences did well at capturing the general gist of the stories, and in some cases included exact words and phrases. Now, in the show notes, folks, from the article, I pulled out a chart where it shows the actual stimulus and the decoded stimulus by the system these folks created. And when you read through this, and I'm not going to read through every one of this, we'll give one example, you can see that it's definitely not a perfect match at all. But it's a very, very profound step forward, even though it's a baby step, if you will. The researchers also had the participants, and this is really weird, Ben, check this out. Can you imagine this? The researchers also had the participants watch silent movies and imagine stories while being scanned. In both cases, the decoder often managed to predict the gist of the stories. Oh, it's too weird. For example, one user thought, I don't have my driver's license yet. And the decoder predicted she has not even started to learn to drive yet. So there's a good example of it's not a perfect match. Of course not. It's the gist, the general essence, if you will, but still very important. And the researchers started by having each participant, this is really bizarre. They started out by having each participant lie in a functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner and listen to 16 hours of narrated stories while their brain responses were recorded.
You can imagine an MRI is that giant coffin-like thing that you slide people into. So, yeah.
16 hours.
Yeah,
no, they didn't say whether it was 16 continuous hours or whether it was a cumulative total of, say, two 8-hour days. I don't know. But that's a lot of time to be in one of those things.
They just had a stick, and they were just sliding crackers in over the course of 16 hours to keep them in there, I guess. No, it was probably over a number of sessions, but still, that's very intense, and kudos on the subjects.
Very intense. I have to imagine they broke it up in maybe 2-hour chunks or something.
Yeah.
Anyway. So then all of this data, these brain responses were then used to train, here we go, machine learning, artificial intelligence. The brain responses were then used to train an encoder, which is a computational model that tries to predict how the brain will respond to words a user hears. Wow. After training, the encoder could quite accurately predict, and I think that's a little stretch to say quite accurately, but the encoder could quite accurately predict how each participant's brain signals would respond to hearing a given string of words. All right, let's get to the bottom line, which the author of the article puts forth. A technology like this that can create language from brain signals could be enormously useful for people who cannot speak due to conditions such as motor neuron disease. Well, true. I mean, that could be just a wonderful gift, right? But to your point, Ben, at the very outset, the dark side, the other side of the blade is at the same time, it raises concerns for future privacy of our thoughts. And boy, is this ever a setup for a sci-fi. We won't need to waterboard people anymore.
Yeah.
We'll just hook them up and get their real thoughts.
Well, and we already try to do this, and I think culturally it's very accepted with the polygraph test. And looking at the polygraph test, it's very not exactly accepted science. But Ralph, I think a lot of people say, hook me up to a polygraph. I'll take a lie detector test, whatever. It's already kind of accepted. This is so far from being, used on random people that don't want to say what they want. Because, Ralph, I mean, you could just imagine that if you don't want people to read your mind, during those 16 hours where they're trying to, coordinate the system with your brain, you could just, think of random things and mess up all of the pathways. I mean, we are so far from being able to read people's minds. But for those who want to, go through the process of training a machine, the inputs, that kind of thing, I do find it very... Ralph, like reading the inputs and then reading the outputs, that the system kind of takes from it. It really reminds me of like a translator. And, you could have two different translators translating from, let's say, German to English. And, they'll wait for the sentence to be said, and then they'll kind of give you the gist of each sentence. And it really is like translating from one language to another, although it's just brain signals in this case to English. And it's very, very cool though. I mean, very, very close. Seeing the inputs and seeing the outputs, pretty accurate.
It's and like we said at the beginning here, it's a step. It's not the final conclusion, clearly, but a very, very interesting breakthrough. Again, the key, folks, in this one, continuous language.
Right. So
output from thinking.
Right. So of course the headline, mind reading ? Mind reading, not yet, but the language of the brain is coming along. So that's story number one. Still very cool. And again, just this idea that you have a system that you can train by inputting data after data after data.
Yeah.
And artificial intelligence, the system of machine learning can turn that into useful outputs. And that and we're seeing it's not just for, generating random pictures, Ralph, or random stories. It's also for, so much more. So very cool first story to start off with.
Fun stuff.
Story number two. And I'll be honest, I think everyone who is remotely involved in technology has probably heard of the SETI project at some point. I know that a while ago, and this was probably in the mid 2000s, that you could actually donate your computer's resources. Back
right.
when. Back when screensavers were all the rage, well, you could download a particular screensaver, and you could, it would, through the internet, you could lend your computer's processing power while it's while it's hibernating or, in screensaver mode, and lend it to SETI to process data and do that kind of thing. It was a very cool program. No aliens yet. But hey, doesn't mean that they've given up hope, even though they've been doing it for decades at this point.
Yes.
Story number 2, they're expanding it.
Yeah, this is fun. And so the headline here, and by the way, this article comes from earthsky.org, another fun outlet, a story by Paul Scott Anderson. And the headline, and sometimes, folks, what I do for our purposes is I will change the headline to make it, if I think it makes it a little more clear for someone who's viewing this or listening to this presentation. So the headline here is SETI Institute has joined forces with VLA to expand the search for aliens. So let's explain what this is all about. So first, what is SETI? SETI is an acronym for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute. And like Ben was saying, most of us probably have heard of SETI.
Right.
And the SETI Institute, these folks are a nonprofit research organization located in California's Silicon Valley, close to the NASA Ames Research Center. And the SETI Institute's mission is to lead humanity's quest to understand the origins and prevalence of life and intelligence in the universe and share that knowledge with the world. And then, wait a minute, what's VLA? This I thought was interesting. VLA is an acronym for the Very Large Array. Sounds kind of straightforward, which is a huge collection of 27 radio telescopes. And we have a picture in the show notes from the article that shows what these telescopes look like. So a huge collection of 27 radio telescopes covering 23 square miles in New Mexico. And it has already been actively surveying 80% of the sky since 2017, collecting data that will help astronomers search for extraterrestrial radio signals, if any exist. So on the 1st of May, this month, the SETI Institute announced that the Very Large Array is joining for the search for alien civilizations. And the SETI Institute is leading the new project in collaboration with the National Radio Astronomy Observatory and the Breakthrough Listen Initiative. And for its new role in SETI, the Very Large Array is using a new processing system called, and this is a mouthful, Commensal Open Source, Commensal Open Source Multimode Interferometer Cluster, and the acronym COSMIC. Okay, gotta have an acronym.
Yeah.
And Paul Demarest, scientist and group lead for the science support at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, stated, quote, COSMIC operates commensally, which means it works in the background using a copy of the data astronomers are taking for other scientific purposes. This is an ideal and a very efficient way to get large amounts of telescope time to search for rare signals, close quote. So that's the idea of, leveraging this data that's already being captured, right? Until now, scientists have used the Very Large Array for many types of radio astronomy, but this is the first time they will use it to look continuously for technosignatures such as artificial radio signals. And now, with the combination of COSMIC and the Very Large Array, SETI will increase its sensitivity about 1,000-fold. Wow. While previous searches have focused on regular types of radio signals, COSMIC can better detect ones not as typical, such as pulsed or transient signals. Interesting. Also, the Commensal Open Source Multimode Interferometer Cluster, aka COSMIC, can monitor an unprecedented number of radio frequencies from about 10 million star systems. Whoa, okay. Well, maybe we'll finally call home and get an answer. Who knows?
It's really amazing just how, I guess to me, I've heard about SETI for such a long time, Ralph, and for them to make this one partnership and they can increase their sensitivity by 1,000-fold, man, SETI was really operating on a very narrow bandwidth, but that doesn't mean what they were doing wasn't, very powerful before. It's just now even more so. And I got to say that one of my favorite stories of, them looking for signs of aliens, and, I've seen Ancient Aliens and, shows like that.
Sure.
But there was one where they found a pulsing regular set of radio waves that they were like, this is very, very regular, very artificial, it seems like. And Ralph, what they, first kind of said that could be anything. It could even be aliens. What I think it ended up being was a pulsar that was rotating at a very regular speed and releasing very powerful energy signatures. And it's like, even if we don't find aliens, which I totally believe somewhere out there, very, very far away, there are aliens, this kind of research still has other implications for science at large. That they would still pick up things that, astronomers are looking for their own things, but being able to, like you said, Ralph, capture that data and read it, you already have the data. Why not read more into it? Hey, maybe you can find other revelations as well. So best of luck to SETI.
Yeah. And another way of looking at this whole picture is what a clever way to A, expand a collaborative team, and B, further leverage data that's already being picked up every day, all day, day after day. So it's a very clever scheme all the way around, I think.
Do you think they're aliens, Ralph?
You have to think just the mathematic probability. Let's put it this way. Life, some kind of life form. I think the trick about looking for life forms in the great universe is we generally think about it in terms of, well, could we find bacteria someplace else? It's always thinking it's our life model from Earth,
right?
Trying to see that someplace else. There could be life, a different definition of life. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling to put it into words, but I think you get my idea.
But yeah, I think even just finding other single-celled organisms, not even multi-cell, but single-cell organisms somewhere else in the universe, either on a meteor, on Mars, even in our own solar system. It's like, Ralph, that alone, I think, would really shift our focus from being like, we're the only things out there to, there's other stuff. And that would be very, I want to say humanizing. It's like, Earth is kind of one of many, and we need to kind of work together because, hey, we're there.
Yeah.
But all that good stuff aside, and I'm not saying that SETI's going to find single-celled organisms, but they might find other cool things. Not even necessarily aliens, but other phenomena that, so good job for them. And there you go. So that's story number 2. Story number 3.
Yes.
I'm hearing more and more about these, and Ralph, I'm certainly hoping because, I've been looking at, I've been wanting to travel, and I'm like, the summer, everything kind of fell into place. I have the time, I have everything I need, but man, airlines are making it hard because like what used to be like a $100, $150 plane ticket is now like a $350, $500 plane ticket. They've canceled like 50%, or not 50%. They canceled like 20% of their flights. Fuel costs are out of control. Ralph, like everything just seems so getting out of such control, and fuel cost, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a long way, contributes a lot to airfare and traveling, and what, I think what a lot of people would like to do, which is travel. Story number 3, though, hopefully alleviates that at some point, because this is not the first story, but this is a trend, and that's what you're here for. So story number 3.
Right. Very good example of a trend. And this also, of course, along with ultimately perhaps lowering the cost of travel, but zero emissions. So here's the headline. World's largest, and I want to qualify, largest to date, zero emission plane to be developed. It hasn't been finished yet. This is a trend. So to be developed by Alaska Airlines and an outfit called ZeroAvia. That's ZERO and then AVIA run together as one word, ZeroAvia. Got this from Hydrogen Fuel News, another outlet which was new to me in my research this week. Really interesting outlet, by the way. Check those guys out. And again, the links are in the show notes, folks. Come out to computeramerica.com, get the show notes. We got a video also that's showing the proof of concept demonstration of their engine attached to this kind of interesting truck-like device. So anyway, here's a story. Alaska Airlines has teamed up with ZeroAvia to develop a zero-emission plane. In a recent event that took place at ZeroAvia's Payne Field Research and Development Site, which, by the way, is in Everett, Washington, Alaska Airlines presented a Bombardier Q400 regional turboprop aircraft to ZeroAvia, and ZeroAvia will retrofit the 76-seat aircraft with a hydrogen electric propulsion system it will design and build. In the video that Ben is showing you, the engine in this case is being tested. Mm-hmm. And all the hydrogen gear, if you will, is on that truck. That's the idea. Alaska Airlines first formed a partnership with ZeroAvia and invested in the company back in 2021. The purpose of the partnership is to support the development of zero emissions propulsion technology for regional aircrafts by establishing the viability of region-sized aircraft. Both companies will help to expand zero emissions flight technology throughout the industry. So they're hoping to inspire the rest of the industry. And ZeroAvia will equip the zero-emission plane with a hydrogen electric engine that uses fuel cells to generate electricity from hydrogen fuel. So this will all make sense in a second here. The generated electricity will then be used to power electric motors that turn the aircraft's propellers. And ZeroAvia's novel propulsion... Sorry, let me try that again. ZeroAvia's novel propulsion... Why can't I say this? Propulsion.
You got this.
Thank you. Thank you. Certifiable ZA2000 system includes the company's in-house developed high-temperature proton exchange membrane fuel cells. Boy, that's another mouthful. And liquid hydrogen gas storage. Both are vital to providing the necessary energy density required by commercial operation of large regional turboprops. Now, in this show notes, folks, I have a side note here that dives into high-temperature proton exchange membrane fuel cells. So if you want to get into that and geek out, it's in the show notes. I'm not going to take time here to go through this. But again, another reason to come out and get the show notes at computeramerica.com. All right, going on. At the recent event, the company debuted its breakthrough multi-megawatt modular electric motor system in a 1.8 megawatt prototype configuration. And this demonstrated with a propeller spin demonstration aboard the company's 15-ton, and you're seeing it now in the video of our presentation. So they did this aboard the company's 15-ton Hypertruck ground testing rig, and that's what's shown, as I mentioned a moment ago, here in the video that we're showing you right now.
Which I got to say, horrible test. That truck got zero airtime. It was a complete failure. Yeah, the truck did not take off once, which is sarcasm. It was not supposed to, but still, lifting
a 15-ton truck with one motor, one propeller would be a real test. Anyway, they think they can pull this off, retrofit this 76-seat plane, and have a test flight by 2024, so next year sometime. And according to the news release about all this, aligning ZeroAvia's powertrain with the airframe of the aircraft that was donated by Alaska Airlines will represent a commercially viable zero-emission plane that is not only equipped with fuel cell engine technology, but will be about, this is great, but will be about 5 times more powerful than anything that has been demonstrated to date. Wow. So not only is it going to eventually be the largest, hydrogen fuel powered aircraft, but 5 times more powerful. Wow. I mean, that's just wow.
It's certainly one thing to have batteries and, in this other type of system, the high temperature proton exchange membrane fuel cell, to have a zero emission like drone, for instance, or even like a single passenger like taxi that we've talked about in the past.
Yes.
Having a 90-person plane, that's going to be a whole nother feat. So you're right. I kind of introduced this whole thing as like cost savings, which, don't get me wrong, as much as we want zero emission and help the environment and stuff like that, it's going to have to be cost effective. That's the only way companies are really going to go for it.
Right on.
But when the two align, and this situation might be just that. When the two align, that's when you're going to see real change. When it's better for the environment and it's cheaper to fly, it's going to be, very, very cool. So, but to actually see it, kind of on the field, and that truck rig system was very, very interesting. But overall, this is, again, a trend to zero emission flying. And you know what story really sticks out, Ralph, talking about this kind of thing in the past, was the article that we did. I think it was probably in January, February, or probably like February of this year. Ralph, it was the one about how much contrails contribute to global warming. That one still, like, even just like last week, I was like looking up at a plane going across the sky, and I was like, hey, look at that contrail. That's a problem. And, I'm still shocked at how much contrails really contribute to environmental change. So zero emission, a huge, sticking point, and I'm glad that it looks like we're making more progress towards that.
Yes. We will get there, period. And that's part of what Ben and I do every Friday, is uplifting trends. We will get there, folks. And I wanted to add one more comment about life outside of the Earth, right?
Go for it.
I was thinking to myself as you were speaking and concluding that article, but I'm going to jump back just for a second. Anybody who thinks there isn't life of some kind outside of the Earth, if you really believe that, you're in the same group that hundreds of years ago said, oh no, the universe revolves around the Earth. Right?
Yes, the Earth-centric model, of course.
There it is. Yeah, and I think it's just as naive and unfortunate as
it's very very short-sighted. But I will give those people a little bit of credit to say that I'm all for evidence first, and I think that's what we all want. And of course, thinking that there is or there isn't evidence, that's there. But I want to see those organisms. And we cover NASA a lot here in the shows, and they have a lot of I think it was last week we had the weird burrowing worm robot that was going to go to one of the moons of Saturn or something like that.
That's right.
That proof may come sooner than we think. So a lot of cool stuff. But to bring it back down to Earth, and back down to Earth, but back in the laboratory, because graphene. Graphene has been a miracle material that has enabled so much, and it's gotten better. But the problem is, Ralph, that even 10% better year over year, graphene is still not quite viable for everyday products. But what it promises to do, it promises to revolutionize batteries, medicine, insulation, building materials, graphene, via car, lightweight car, stuff like that. It has so much promise, and this is another story that graphene can do anything except leave the laboratory. So story number 4, but still, eventually it will leave the laboratory. Yes. So story number 4.
Yeah, story number 4 is a good example of what very often Ben and I do. We end our Friday segment usually with something that has to do with medical science and technology advancements, and this is right in that category. So the headline here is: a graphene tattoo could help hearts keep their beat. Irresistible headline. Graphene, that's one thing. Tattoo? Wow. That could help hearts keep their beat. Love it. Got this from sciencenews.org, wonderful outlet. Story by Meghan Rosen. And there's an image here of some of this test tattoo, graphene-based tattoo. So getting to the stories here, researchers at Northwestern University in Chicago recently applied a graphene tattoo stuck to the hearts of rats. Mice and rats, we owe them a debt. Stuck to the hearts of rats with abnormally sluggish heartbeat. So they found some rats that had this heartbeat problem, like many humans do too, and stuck this graphene tattoo on it. Like a futuristic pacemaker, the device delivered electrical signals that kept the heart pumping properly. The electronic device is currently a proof of concept. This is a great example of the stories that Ben and I look for. Trends. Where are we going? But a version for use in human hearts could be ready for testing, the researchers contend, within about 5 years. According to Igor Efimov, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, it's Efimov. He's a cardiovascular engineer at Northwestern University in Chicago. And Efimov and his colleagues have worked for years creating implantable devices that conform to the body. And what we mean by this is a main challenge is how to marry rigid electronics with soft, sometimes throbbing tissues, like the heart. Now, a little background. For most current pacemakers, doctors thread electrodes on long wires through a vein inside the heart. And every time the heart beats, some 100,000 times per day your heart beats, the wires flex. Enough flexing, and the device eventually breaks, the research leader noted in this effort. One solution is to use ultra-thin materials that ride along the heart's movements. And think of it, as the author of the article said, think of it like plastic wrap clinging to quivering jello.
Yeah, that's a good image to have in your mind.
Yes,
but
yes, it is.
Pretty apt.
Yes. So in 2021, Efimov and his team saw something that looked promising. A research paper on graphene devices applied to the skin like temporary tattoos. Unlike the metal components often used in electronics, graphene is atomically thin with a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a honeycomb pattern. The tattoos the researchers developed for the heart use, the tattoos researchers developed for heart use sandwich a transparent layer of graphene between sheets of stretchy silicone and ultra-thin polymer. Gold tape connects the graphene to wires that run to a power source, which sends electricity through to the device. So there's a little bit of the mechanics of what's going on here. Now, that's what they've got right now. Future versions of the tattoo will be wireless, Efimov and his team say, perhaps using a tiny antenna to pick up electrical signals from an external device placed on a person's chest. And one day, Efimov envisions graphene electrodes. Oh, you're going to love this, Ben. They think they can get graphene electrodes the size of rice grains injected into heart muscle. What? Wow. Wow. Such miniature equipment could perform pacemaker duties without the typical clunky components. And the lead researcher, Efimov, says, quote, that all might sound like science fiction, and it does, but the technology is almost here. Now is the time to develop it. Wow. The size of rice grains injected into the heart muscle. You got to love that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Ralph, for long-term listeners, they know a little bit of your medical background, and
yes.
Anything to kind of avoid opening up the chest. I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that. So to be able to inject, maybe even rice-sized things, and put this temporary tattoo on. Yes. I mean, they're really figuring out how to fix, the heart, the brain, the lungs, whatever it may be. Just the other week we had a story about, potentially closing up wounds with the lung, using like a sticky material. I mean, I don't know. I find it kind of fun that one of the biggest obstacles to treating people is just how kind of wet and mushy we are inside, as pleasant as that is to think about, but they're overcoming it, and they're finding ways around it, get bandages to stick, to get things to kind of stay where they're supposed to. It's very, very cool. So there you go. And really with this article and with all these different ones, Ralph, I think you really lived up to your mission here on the show, which is, hey, show us some trends and show us where we're going with technology, science, medicine, and so much more. So ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more about these stories, we'll have the show notes up by the time that you hear this, and you can head on over to computeramerica.com. And of course, if you go over to the Ralph-centric focus right there, you can see the video portion right there, prominent, of our latest interview, as well as past articles. And of course, we're going to put a link up to Ralph's site if you want Ralph specifically. Hey, we can head on over to his site. So I want to thank you again, Ralph, for joining us here every single Friday. And for everyone else out there, I hope you have a great weekend. Do something fun. We'll catch you next time. Until then, bye everyone.